I think the key is the original idea of digitization of travel was connecting supply and demand. All of the players who have come after that have got stuck in solving that problem. While the world moved on to say simply connecting supply and demand will not resolve anybody's problem. So the one part is when we say differentiated proposition, make sure the proposition means it. It is different, it is standing out, and it is offering value. And secondly, travel is notorious for being a 100% churn market almost, which means there is a very difficult repeat purchase cycle. You always look for a new player. I think as an industry, we all need to think very hard about this. Why does this happen? For me, limited 6 year experience in travel, I put the blame on two simple things. One is trust deficit. We only sell, we don't service as an industry. When somebody buys from us, they are our customer. We should not leave them to hung dry.
Hello and welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. I'm Roshan Cariappa. If this is your first time here, we curate wisdom from India's best founders, operators, and investors. So, whatever your questions, whether it is learning how to do the 0 to 10 million in sales, or engaging and retaining users, or the nuances of operating in fintech and healthcare and any other domain, you have all the answers here from folks who've been there and done that. On this episode, I speak with Ashish Sidhra, who is the co-founder of Alike. Alike is a travel platform that empowers content creators in the travel space to curate experiences that consumers can discover and book. Ashish and I discuss how travel has changed post-COVID, the various nuances of operating in the space, from competing in a fragmented market to managing last mile delivery to building a brand. We also discuss the fact that Ashish has bootstrapped his business and how founders should execute very prudently in this current macro environment. We haven't had too many travel founders on the podcast, and I was thrilled and surprised to learn about some of these nuances and fascinating insights that Ashish brought up. I really loved this conversation, as I hope you will too. So let's dive into this episode of the Startup Operator Podcast with Ashish Sidhra. This episode of the Startup Operator Podcast is brought to you by Park Avenue. Hey Ashish, welcome to the Startup Operator Podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
Roshan, it's a pleasure to be talking to you today.
Wonderful. So Ashish, as I mentioned, we haven't had a lot of travel startups on the podcast earlier, and I'm really curious to understand about your domain, how you're executing in the space. How do you get started in the travel domain? I mean, I was looking at some of your experience. It doesn't quite correlate as much with what you're doing at this point of time. So, was it some kind of a moment's passion, or did you really seriously think about the space and feel that there's a lot of business potential in this endeavor?
Yeah, so Roshan, you got it right. My experience is primarily in the digital space, if I put it that way. That has been my primary calling. It's a combination of couple of things. As part of my digital experience previously, I did had the opportunity to work with Dubai Tourism, which was baptism with fire for the travel world. Dubai is the fourth largest, most visited city in the world. So there is a lot of proactive work that happens in Dubai tourism in this front. So that was one. Combined it with, personally, I'm a very avid traveler. I like traveling, whether it is for business or family. And those two things combined, as a traveler, I have seen some pains around being a traveler and being an unknown space in an international location, and what digital could do in the travel space in Dubai tourism. When these two things came together, that brought the entrepreneur in myself out to solve some very pertinent issues in the travel space. That made me a travel entrepreneur.
Right. And how do you get started? I mean, all of us kind of notice things that we could do better. All of us ponder about problems and so on, right? So, how did you go from idea to product to company?
Yeah, so I think we didn't have the initial thought that brought me out as an entrepreneur was not a let's change the world kind of thinking. The problem that I first found out was, as a traveler, when we go to a global location, the first thing we find is communicating and digitally connecting in that country is very expensive. Roaming on your phones is very expensive. This, knowing that we digitally feast in our home markets, we are always on our phone. We go on digital fasting when we go to an international location. We switch off roaming, then we are looking for Wi-Fi hotspots. This was my entrepreneurial calling, if you may call it, in the beginning. This is the problem I wanted to solve. I had a telecoms background, I had a digital background, and Dubai was a classic destination to launch a service which gives customers the ability to connect at local rates. And that combined with, I was not sure I'm an entrepreneur or not. So I wanted to try something. So it started as a hobby. We just launched it. I told my employer I want to try something. Dubai Tourism encouraged these kind of things. So I went out and tried. It started helping, doing pretty well. That is where the aha moment happened. And the aha moment was very simple. Digital in travel was one of the first impact areas to happen. In 2003, 2004, bookings went digital for hotels and flights. And if we may call it, the long tail of travel got lost after that. We became a forgotten digital backyard. So there, if you ask me, if you have to go to a country and do an experience, you normally will stand in a queue to book your tickets. Only around 20% of global experiences and attractions are currently digitized. So that huge opportunity, suddenly not only connectivity, but booking tickets is where the overall thinking started for us as an entrepreneur, that should this be the area we are going after? And this was the genesis of a trial entrepreneur became a full-time entrepreneur to digitize the long tail of travel.
So here again, what is your advice for someone who's looking to get started, right? Because I'm sure, people hearing this podcast are nursing an idea or two and perhaps have been mulling about it for months and years together, right? So I like this idea of how you did a trial before you actually dove in with both feet, right? So for folks who are listening to this who may have similar passions, right? How should they get started?
Very good question. And I think it will come down to first trying to ask ourselves the difficult question, what kind of entrepreneurial personality I am. Some people are very clearly born entrepreneur, right from risk taking to that mindset. They know very clearly. And the best way to try it out is just go and try it. I think the question where it becomes a bigger query to resolve is people like me. I have been in an enterprise environment for years. It was more a case of, do I have it within me to become an entrepreneur? Combined with, there are bills to be paid. Should I suddenly leave anything and jump ship? Moonlighting has been a very emotional topic being discussed in India, but it has its positive sides, huge positive sides, when done fairly and when all the parties involved are on the same page. So absolutely test it out. If you are not 100% sure, test it out with full commitment. Testing doesn't mean that you are not doing your current job properly or you are not doing your entrepreneurial gig properly. You will have to work really, really hard in that initial phase, because you are doing more than two jobs actually. Entrepreneurship is more than one job. So be prepared, plan it out, give it a try, and keep if we call it a pilot phase, the outcomes of that should be very narrowly defined. Don't try to, solve world hunger during that phase. So keep it managed and prove it to yourself, because you are not proving the business model, you are proving you can succeed in that environment. So be clear on these outcomes, and I'm sure it will be much clearer at the other side whether you are the entrepreneur. And it's no shame to then say it's not for me. The worst part is to stick with it even when you have realized entrepreneurship is not for you. Once we sort that out, it is a clear path from that point onward.
What are some things that you wish you knew earlier?
The effort involved. What happens is we all go to LinkedIn, we all go to press, and we see the joys of a successful entrepreneur. Again, for those 10 successful stories, there are millions of not so successful stories and tens of millions of failures. And we latch on to those 100 and we see only the outcomes, the beautiful rewards. It is very, very hard in this journey. And for us, we have been tested even more severely, because as a travel company, we have handled COVID during the journey. So, when you read stories, you need to be having guts of steel if you have to become entrepreneur. I heard it. My initial trial was a success. So I jumped in with all feet, hands together. And then I have realized it is difficult. But if you can manage that difficult, it is an amazing journey to enjoy as well. So if you ask me what should I have known better, I think it is what should I have been mentally prepared better. Is it can genuinely get very hard and beyond all our imaginations if a black swan plays out.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, looking back at my entrepreneurial journey as well, I never quite understood how difficult it was going to get. And in my case, I mean, it was, very naively optimistic. I kind of organically stumbled into being a founder. Yeah, I mean, I wish someone had told me, how hard it was going to get and how hard it would be on people around me as well, not just myself. With that background, could you talk to us about Alike and what you're aiming to do with it? I see that as sort of digitally curating all of these different experiences and sort of making it accessible to as many people as possible, right? But I'll let you explain that.
Sure. Actually, if you see Alike is a huge step up where we started. When we were just speaking a few minutes back, the story ended at offering one place to easily book long tail of travel in one platform. But that story is before COVID. When everything stopped during COVID, we, as an entrepreneur, for myself personally, there was a choice. Shut down everything. You have to do something else. This will not work. The world will travel again or not. Yeah. At that point, it was a conviction. There is no way you can take travel out of humanity. But at the same time, adapting to the new realities. The new realities which we were already seeing during COVID time was people will have even lesser trust, more disbelief when they come out of COVID and when they are trying to travel. And the aha moment was, who do we trust as a traveler? Reality, we don't trust the brands. So who do we trust? We trust fellow travelers. So when this aha moment happened, the let's make long tail of travel digital became let's connect these two very needing each other segments of the traveler and the people who are doing the travel content. The reality is 80% of us actually decide where to go and what to do based on recommendations or content we see from fellow travelers on Instagram, on YouTube, on blogs, etc. That's the reality. In millennials, this actually goes up to 90%. But it is these content creators who get nothing out of this. They fight with each other to get maybe some brand deals, etc., to make them travel to a place, etc. It's a very hard life. So a journey which started on digitizing the long tail of travel became the shop front for these travel content creators. Alike is where travel content creators can put their travel content as bookable itineraries. And people like you and I will go there and say, I'm looking for a trip to New York with toddlers. Now, we all know personalization, we all of us want, and we all know we get nothing of it. We get cookie cutter trips on every other travel platform. So on one side, we are looking for personalized travel, which addresses my needs from somebody I can believe. Other side, there is a content creator who is creating all this content, but whatever is connecting them globally is not doing a fair economic transfer from the traveler to the content creator. Alike changes all of that. On one side, it gives a personal studio for each content creator to convert their content into a bookable itinerary. And on the other side, to a traveler, it gives that amazing choice of engaging with fellow travelers who they can trust, pick what suits them, and book all these experiences on a single platform. So you can book your hotels, your experiences, your commute, your connectivity, all of that in alike.io. And that is what the platform does. It is a creator economy platform which provides a shopfront for content creators and enabling travelers to personalize their trips from trusted sources.
So, in other words, it converts your travel content bloggers, influencers, and so on to, sort of digital travel operators themselves. They get to actually participate in the value chain rather than sort of passively help folks discover new places or new experiences.
Very well put, very well articulated. So we are actually making travelpreneurs real across the masses. Travel business is no longer large companies' domain. With what we are doing at Alike, if you take it to the what is your global vision, the global vision is if you have within yourself to become a travelpreneur, we give you all the tools. You no need to go to 200 countries to sign up with 20,000 experience providers, 1 million hotel providers. We have done it for you. You come in, your specialization is let the world know what they should be looking at or experiencing, and we enable to make it commercially active so that you can earn a revenue out of it.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think the way people travel has also changed immensely, right? Over the last, 15, 20 years. I mean, this is the Instagram generation. We don't do the standard, 7 days, 6 night kind of tour with Cox and Kings anymore. People prefer very bespoke experiences. and stuff that normally doesn't fit into these store packages and so on and so forth. And at the same time, there is such a preponderance of this kind of content, right? Whether it's on Instagram or other social platforms as well. And I think this is a very meaningful bridge to sort of help these folks monetize their passion, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. As you rightly said, the key thing is the current buyer does not like being sold to. Yeah. Combine that with they are very confident to not always go and look for a complete end-to-end package tour. Complete end-to-end package tour was lack of confidence and lack of knowledge to go to being unaware of where you are traveling to. So let somebody handle it for me. People are very willing to go and pick and choose and relate to people who they can connect with, and travel like them. So therefore, the punchline for a like.io is travel like the people you like. That is what we bring together as experiences.
So you briefly touched upon COVID, right? And I think while COVID impacted pretty much every industry, none more so than travel and hospitality, right? I mean, it completely wrecked the industry. Travel came to a halt in 2020, and a lot of folks even wondered if it'll ever come back, right? But then we saw that travel has really bounced back, and how. I think people have this very intrinsic sense to travel, to explore, even the more quieter, introverted ones among us. So, talk to me about that time during COVID, right? What did you tell your team? How do you see the impact playing out? And how did you stay afloat?
So yeah, that's a painful period with which we can look back with pride now, on what we have done. So just to take a step back and say, it has been bad for many industries, but how bad and shocking it has been for travel, I think the simple fact is if we take 2009 to 2018, 10 years, global travel spend has overperformed global GDP growth year on year for those 10 years. GDP went up and down, there were economic crises, etc. But the spend in global travel spend always, the growth always was higher than the GDP growth. So this is an industry which is very high on confidence and saying nothing can happen to us even if the world is looking south. And then COVID happens. What COVID did was it took away 2/3 of the travel numbers, 2/3, just like that. And that amounted to 2 billion international arrivals, just gone, right from the market. That is what it did. And of course, we were a small company. We had just started. We had taken baby steps. Everything stopped for us. And as they say, you as an entrepreneur, it's tough, but what makes you win in these adverse circumstances is being nimble and being smart. And we say this with pride. At that time, travel only meant face masks. And that is what us as travel entrepreneurs did. I have been reading with very huge interest is, Airbnb story of, they doing cereal boxes and doing 33,000 odd dollars out of it. And that's now part of, Hall of Fames. So we have our own story. When travel stopped, we basically did masks. But we did masks in a very entrepreneurial and enterprise style. We established, supply chains in Vietnam, China, India, Bangladesh, bringing in masks from there, from actually people who were suffering, giving them employment, bringing them in and selling it in Europe and US. And yes, we did do 150,000 pounds out of it, which allowed us to sustain our teams during that phase and actually invest in our platform, which was the Alike platform during that time, to come out of the COVID and ready to go as we were coming out of COVID. So nimbleness, being aware of what is the opportunity and being able to, steer the ship very quickly in that direction, that helped us out.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think Airbnb also was a classic case, right? I mean, 2020, they were due to go IPO sometime that year, and their bookings dropped by something like 80% in March or April. And they had to do all of those rounds of layoffs and stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think there are a couple of podcast episodes, maybe on NPR and so on, where Brian Chesky talks about that, and I highly recommend that as well. Remarkable story of perseverance against all odds.
Indeed, in Airbnb in UK, if you see the same characteristics they play at a bigger level, is that when the properties were empty, Airbnb and many other players were rechanneling these properties for first responders, because those were the people who were requiring accommodation, temporary accommodation. And these Platforms then channeled them to where the opportunity was. So again, a case of, be nimble, see where the opportunity is. Even in the worst times, there will be an opportunity, steer towards that.
Have you seen a change in attitudes with people as such, like pre-COVID and post-COVID, in terms of what their travel aspirations are, what they expect out of just going to other countries and so on?
Indeed, I think the first thing even before we go into behavior, what we have to be careful of is to project a straight line out of this pent up demand we are seeing currently. Just like when you see a sale in market, there is a something on offer and the sales go up, a pent up demand. This is exactly what is happening here. Is we are seeing holidays which were not there for last 2 years. So the demand will come down and start to normalize, and it will start taking the growth curve we have seen till 2019. But still, as we said, travel grows. But this growth is on back of, as you were already suggesting, some very interesting changes in consumer behavior. So what we are seeing on our platforms, first of all, is the booking windows are reducing, which means people are now booking nearer to the time of they want to travel. So if we see within country, we are talking about days now. People book at the drop of a hat and they will no more than a week or so. So India within India. Indians traveling within 4 hours of travel distance. So let's pick up Dubai, which is a very big market for us. We are looking at booking windows reducing from 3 months to 2 to 3 weeks. And going to Europe, a 6 month planning window pre-COVID has collapsed now to 2 to 3 months. So this is one of the big changes we are seeing. Last minute, be prepared for that. Your demand will be nearer to travel time. People are more cautious and they are more rule aware. Cancellation policies and fairness and is a big thing they are seeking. They are seeking, don't give me refund in just a voucher and get me stuck to your platform. Something which we are very careful at alike. All our refund policies are cashback if they need it, as far as they are managing our timelines. Another big change we have seen is the kind of vacations. Till very recently, or till the first half of this year, international locations had not fully opened up. So we have seen a very huge spurt in demand for staycations, going nearby locations, staying domestically, and a very new word coming up called vocations. So because people were very tied to their homes, work from home, people are now combining a trip on a work trip. People said business travel will die. It has reduced. It has gone nowhere. And it will come back as people want not to travel only for work, but for change as well. We have seen vacations coming up, so much so that hotel providers are coming up with products which support vacations. So there are, instead of a booking which starts at 3 p.m. and goes up to 10 a.m. next morning, we are looking at 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. hotel bookings to come and work from a hotel. So there is that kind of user behavior change. There are many more, but booking windows, rule aware, fairness, and staycations and vacations kind of things which we need to be aware of as changing user behavior.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. And I've seen some of these, very anecdotally as well, right? In terms of, booking windows closing in and so on. People do seem to travel on a whim a lot more these days, I think. See, we spoke about COVID, which is kind of an extreme event, but even so, I think the travel space is extremely difficult to operate in, right? I mean, it's to begin with, I think there's just so much of fragmentation. There are thousands or perhaps tens of thousands of options for anyone wanting to book a trip to Dubai or Vietnam or wherever else, right? And the fact that ensuring this last mile delivery and quality is again very, very difficult, right? I mean, standardizing that is super difficult. From having been in the space for the last 5-6 years, what are some principles that you've picked up in terms of differentiating in a fragmented market?
Right. So what you have really pointed out is the biggest issue that a startup or even a large companies have to keep on resolving in travel. So right, fragmented, there are so many players. Even historically, if you see the number of travel agents in good old days people could go to, translate that into current OTAs generation, you can find them everywhere. I think the key is the original idea of digitization of travel was connecting supply and demand. All of the players who have come after that have got stuck in solving that problem. While the world moved on to say simply connecting supply and demand will not resolve anybody's problem. So the one part is when we say differentiated proposition, Make sure the proposition means it. It is different, it is standing out, and it is offering value. And secondly, travel is notorious for being a 100% churn market almost, which means there is a very difficult repeat purchase cycle. You always look for a new player. I think as an industry, we all need to think very hard about this. Why does this happen? For me, limited 6-year experience in travel, I put the blame on two simple things. One is trust deficit. We only sell, we don't service as an industry. Something which in alike we are working very hard to solve. When somebody buys from us, they are our customer. We should not leave them to hung dry, and problems will happen. I'm not here to pretend even for a second. Exactly because of the problem you raised, Roshan, on the last mile, on the providers landscape, things will go wrong. First we have to manage customer expectation that there will be those occasions due to rough weather, some experience may not be running, a flight got cancelled, a hotel room was not clean, things will go wrong. So manage expectations, but when these things go wrong, service recovery is very important. At that point, a platform simply cannot wash their hands off and say, not my problem. So trust deficit, and combine it with FOMO-led deal-seeking behavior, where customer will go to Skift tells us 38 different websites before they book a travel.
Wow.
Yeah. We have found out, yes, there is an extreme deal seeker segment, but there is a huge segment which goes after convenience as well. So what is that right balance? We never pretend to be the cheapest in the market. Alike will never be the cheapest in the market. We will give you significant value, but we solve convenience for you. And we are finding people who have value for saving their time, a brand who they can trust to service them, as compared to, I want the cheapest. You can buy a shirt or you can buy a shirt. What shirt you buy, if you basically buy what you get, and finally customers get it. So we at Alike don't try to go after the whole market. Extreme deal seekers are a very genuine segment. Unfortunately, we cannot serve their demands because of the service model we have. So if we go at an industry level and addressing a fragmented market, I think the key is have a differentiated proposition which genuinely is differentiated. In our case, it is connecting content, actual recommendation providers with the buyers. And importantly, just don't be a sales platform, service them as well. So if not, 100% of people coming back to you, have a target which says, X percentage should come back to me, and that X percentage increases every year because they remembered. I bought from this service provider and they helped me when things went wrong. So that's the fragmented market side. Now, last mile, similarly, it's not a problem. It's not something which there is not a problem. There is a problem. There is a problem because there are too many moving parts. Flights, hotels, experiences, a commute. 50 odd providers come together to make a 7-day holiday real. When there are so many points of failure, it can go wrong somewhere. What we are trying to make sure at Alike is these points of failure are genuine points of failure and not an issue of intent or malified intent. And how does it come up with, this comes up when we are signing up providers and continuously working with our experience partners on providing the best experience. Things go wrong with us as well. But when we find out that these things going wrong is due to intent, that is when that partner cannot be on our platform. So keeping those basic, simple principles and working hard on that, it's a problem which will resolve over a period of time, but that proactiveness is needed.
Very interesting. I think the two major things that I glean from what you said is that in a fragmented market, the demand is captive anyway, right? You will have demand. I think the real differentiator is service, right? That is the one thing.
And the proposition.
Exactly. And the second thing is find your niche and have a differentiated value proposition for that niche, right? The fact that you say that, the deal seeker is not your ICP or the ideal customer, I think is a great thing, right? Because it, segments the audience that you're going after very well. Yeah, that's very interesting. But in any of these platforms, right? I mean, you have the classic chicken egg situation of a two-sided marketplace, right? I mean, you have the supply, you will need the demand, and if you have the demand, then you will get the supply. Kind of getting this flywheel started in terms of matches being made and so on. I mean, that's a tricky problem, right? What are some things that have worked for you?
So first of all, get the principle right is what I would suggest. It's about the moment you prioritize one over the other is when things start going wrong. And this is not only in the startup phase, it is also once you are a big business. For some large ride sharing platforms, they started with the prioritizing riders over customers or customers over riders. And we know exactly what happens in the market when you prioritize one over other. So for us, I think the key part is treat both the two-sided business model sides as treat them as customers, treat them as equal, treat them as customer, how you will like to be treated as a customer. That's the first principle we have gone in with. As you rightly pointed out, it's a chicken and egg. Who comes first, who comes after, who comes second, third, fourth. And I think what we are trying to do is to convert these combinations into micro markets, what we call as micro markets. Break down the large traveler segment into smaller segment, and which travel content creators will talk to this travel segment is the small segment on the travel content creator side, and you go after them as one micro market, and you try to make it as small as possible so that it is addressable for a startup, because otherwise we are boiling the ocean going after the huge travel content creator side and the even bigger traveler market side. So we restrict by geography, we restrict by content types. So say blog writers versus photographers versus videographers. We are talking about millennial travel, we are talking about adventure travel, we are talking about solo travel. So you start creating microcosms on both sides, and you find the connecting dots between the two. You get a small micro market. Now once it is a bit more manageable, be very targeted, be very KPI driven, be very experiment driven. Sometimes things will not work. We have gone to content providers and we have got a pushback, who are you? We have changed our strategy, we have gone back with our story, and immediately there is an engagement. So it is like, we all know the term, overabused term, growth hacking. Same applies for acquisition on both sides. Come up with a proposition, go out, experiment, it fails. Even if it succeeds, take the best practices, review, but work in what we call as micro markets. Very, very important. Otherwise, this is too complicated an equation to solve as on its own.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a general principle as well, right? I mean, don't look at problems as these huge monoliths. Kind of break it down into more manageable parts and then make one thing successful and then take it from there, basically. And I've heard similar advice from, other entrepreneurs we've had who are, operating in similar markets as well. This episode of the Startup Operator podcast is brought to you by Park Avenue. Now that we're all back at the office meeting colleagues and clients, it's time to ditch those PJs and look sharp with Park Avenue's range of 100% cotton, wrinkle-free shirts. They're super easy to maintain and keep you looking fresh through the day. So my fellow startup operators, visit the Park Avenue store or myraymond.com and check out the new wrinkle-free shirt collection. Now, these folks that you work with on the content creator side, right? I mean, can you talk about these folks? I mean, who are these folks? I mean, are they full-time content creators? Are they folks who travel for passion? What is the nature of these folks as such?
It's a fascinating market, with the boundaries of publication dropping down. Originally only a large magazine or a large TV channel could publish. Now everybody is a publisher. So we are in a fully democratized creator economy. As a point in fact, we used to be in attention economy in the zones, in the times of the Facebooks of the world. They seek 1 second of attention, put an ad in front of you, make money. And then TikTok came in, which is creator economy, where you shift the money to the creator and depend on them to create content. We can see the outcomes on the share prices of these companies. So when world moves from attention economy to creator economy, we are seeing these creators, these are people like you and us. You and I you are a big time content creator, right? With your podcast, you are creating content, you are creator economy. So it is people like you and us. We are content creators. We are different levels of content creators. But the ones which Alike is talking to is again democratized, and we are talking to all of them. We are trying to talk to celebrities. They are content creators. They go to travel places. We all, fascinate to aspire to go to those places and live those lives. We talk to professional content creators who only make their living from creating content. Millions of followers. People again aspire to look up to them, but people who aspire to look up to them are travelers, but other content creators as well. When they see these amazing people earning millions out of their travel escapades, and there is a huge market of content creators, what we call as amateur content creators, the wannabes, the side hustles. And those are the content creators which are one of our biggest markets, the wannabes. Why are they wannabes? They do amazing piece of work. they don't have revenue generation opportunity. So while we are serving these celebrities, yes, one day we look forward to, host celebrities on the platform because we give them deeper engagement. We call Instagrams and the Facebooks and the YouTubes of the world as marketing platform for travel content creator. But for sales, they need a like. And it is true for celebrities. They engage shallow, very shallow on Instagram. 1 second of consuming a Insta post, and then it is shelf life is gone. But that same trip that they did to Maldives, if posted on a like, allows the masses to book what their favorite Bollywood star did, for their favorite cricketer did, and the engagement goes deeper, and it just allows that bond to go deeper with their followership. For professionals, again, you can have 1, 2, 3, 4 brand deals a year. We give you a continuous revenue stream. And for amateurs, we are saying, guys, you struggle to get brand deals. Be respectful to your effort. Earn money from whatever you are publishing by driving your traffic to book those travel. They are all around us. They are beautiful photographs on Instagram. They are amazing vlogs on YouTube. They are blog writers. We want these amateurs to become professionals on back of a like, and true travel entrepreneurs.
Right. So in essence, there's something in it for everyone, basically, for every kind of influencer or blogger and so on.
Yeah, and you said it's good you brought up everyone, because the last segment, which is around 600 million, is the travelers, all of us. When we travel every year, we come back and put amazing travel photographs on Instagram, on Facebook, we share with family, and we look at that ego casting, and say, wow, people are liking my content. But what do we get? Nothing. Platforms make ad revenue on back of that. Imagine now this itinerary is quickly put up on a like, and few people end up booking your travel itinerary. A like gives revenue share for each booking that is induced because of your itinerary. Imagine you make money out of it, and your next year's travel is fully funded out of what you did this year's travel itinerary. So it is that market, which is you and I, which is the uncles and aunties and the college goers that we are talking to. You travel once, you make money, next year's travel is paid for. And that's the fascinating part of the platform.
So let me take a step back and look at the business in principle, right? And there are principles and there are metrics, and we know what gets prioritized, right? I mean, the things that get prioritized are the KPIs and the OKRs, which ultimately someone is responsible for. And at some level, as a business owner, you have to sort of mirror both of these if you want sustainable growth, right? Your principles and your metrics as such. And you have, as I said, a two-sided marketplace, and the very difficult job of aligning both these incentives, right? Incentives for travelers, incentives for content creators as such. And perhaps there's a third persona who are, all of these hotels, the experience owners, and so on and so forth as well, right? It seems like a very difficult problem to align all of these folks' interests and incentives and so on and so forth. So I'm just curious, what is it that you measure on a daily, monthly, quarterly basis, right? What are your teams optimizing for?
So for us, I think the key is try to, first of all, for the teams, reduce this two-sided pull on principles and metrics. That is the job of the co-founders. So myself and my co-founder, sort of, one of the things is these need to be as near to each other. Principles are a bit, up in the stratosphere, and numbers are more, day-to-day grind. It's about jumping in and then course correcting. I will not even for a second pretend we are the ideal company where this works in complete unison and there is no problem at all. The value we can add as co-founders and at the leadership team level as well is you go in and course correct. Sometimes acquisition targets can start hurting the service levels we are providing. So keep your ears close to the ground and hear the feedback. Feedback, one negative feedback, quickly check, is it structural? Is something changing? The idea was to give service. Have we failed somewhere? We try to make sure we are giving fair share of revenue to the merchants. We are not going and over negotiating with them, so that the experience providers are getting their fair share. And for our content providers, we are a startup. It's a reality at times their bookings will be going up and down because of the traffic we are getting. At that times, we are intervening. We are at the verge of coming up with a structured content funding program, where we will fund some of these activities in the initial phase while we are building. So, as far as you stay clear on your principle, and that principle is at the execution level as well, strategy and execution working in unison, it's about continuous cycle of course correction. I have never ever seen any company having ideal KPIs, which are principles and KPIs, like that's nirvana, which is not available on planet Earth.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Recently I heard about how Amazon Web Services structures its sales and solutions teams, right? And it kind of blew my mind because obviously the sales guys are incentivized to go and sell more and more cloud solutions to the customers, right? But the solutions guy is tasked with optimizing that. And, they kind of work in opposing forces to each other, right? While one guy is selling more and more cloud, right, the other person has to reduce consumption, has to optimize consumption. And when I asked why this was the case, I mean, the answer was that, hey, I mean, we put our customers first. It's crazy how that works at scale, at an AWS scale, right? And which is, I don't know how much they're doing right now, maybe like $4 or $5 billion a quarter, maybe more than that, right?
Yeah, and it is fascinating. We are a AWS customer, but I think the biggest learning that I take away from this observation of yours, Roshan, is that we are a small company, and we pride ourselves on achieving small things. Now, replicate it at that scale, yeah, we will be even more prouder. When if we can do that at that scale and maintain this continuous course correction for keeping your KPIs near to your principles.
Right, right. I think it's something that's aspirational for every person, I suppose, right, irrespective of what business or
So
domain
very
they're
true.
in.
So very
Yeah.
true.
I'm curious of how your sales and marketing works, right? Because typical, I think in the travel space, you go crazy on performance marketing, right? Basically, I mean, you bid on things and then you figure out, what your CAC is and then, how much you're earning out of that. And really the focus on lifetime value or LTV, I would say, I mean, it's priority too, right? It's not so much a priority because as you mentioned, repeat purchases on the travel and experience side of things is not that great, right? So how does customer acquisition work at Alike?
So, Roshan, first of all, you confirm to me you have never worked in travel, because I suspect that. That's a very deep insight, Roshan. So, key for us, and I will put cards out on the table. This was one of the things. This is again, when you have a bit more time to think during the COVID, is we this was one of the things when we were making the technical platform for Alike. The thought process was running at three levels, technology, business, financials. The financials part was the one which brought us to this very big observation, is death by CAC. You go performance marketing, and let's call it PPC unashamedly, you throw money and then you compete, and then one large player with capital G wins all the business. They are the ones whose revenue go up. Travel happens to be Google's largest, first one or two segments where they earn money from. We took a business call, we took a financial call. This will never be our primary sales channel. Once we have tied our hands, now it is how we will spin. Instead of saying, forcing ourselves to think this is the only way, we said this way is not available as your primary. What will you do? So when we do our marketing, we are a bootstrapped startup operating out of 3 countries, serving 200 nationalities. We will die if we go performance marketing first. So we have gone very smart, and we call it the choke point strategy. Choke point strategy, what in our mind is very simple. Where do travelers congregate physically or digitally, and try to partner there, whether it is partnering with, we have been, Dubai Tourism has been very kind to, be our founding city. They support us a lot. We work very closely with Dubai airports. We are doing similarly partnerships with large, credit card providers in India. It's working with large brands, standing on their shoulder and being visible. So we have done that choke point. We have gone and made ourselves visible and reduced our acquisition cost dramatically as compared to competition. That helps us do many nicer things on other journey customer touch points.
Yeah. Just a quick point to add there, right? I mean, startups generally tend to think that, partnerships as a function tends to be like a big company game, right? I mean, when I get to a certain critical size, I will have, partners, resellers, some kind of strategic relationships and so on. But I think that's one of those overlooked things that can be a huge lever, right? And which you are kind of demonstrating. Yeah.
Very good observation. And I think it will also come to, maybe it was beneficial for both of us co-founders because we came from an enterprise background. So we didn't had the weight of, oh my God, I will have to talk to a large brand. So message for people, who are coming out of colleges, who are starting their startups. To your point, Roshan, Never get overwhelmed with brand partnerships. Brands are hungry. The only secret I will give away, don't look at a brand as a brand. Try to find the right people in those brands.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the secret to crack large brands. Once you
Yeah.
find the right person in that brand, those guys are hungrier than you to partner with startups because it gives them the speed that is sometimes difficult in large brands.
Yeah. No, that's a great point again. I used to do partnerships maybe 2 or 3 years back, and one thing I realized was that it has to ultimately make sense for the man on the ground on the other side, right? I mean, somebody should perhaps meet their sales quota, or somebody should have metrics that they can show to their bosses and feel good about it. Otherwise, it might never get prioritized, because oftentimes we think of partnerships as well as very top down initiatives, right? That some two CEOs will sign a piece of agreement and it will just get executed, but it never
Never
really
happens
gets
that way.
prioritized. Yeah, unless your counterpart on the other side is looking good to their bosses, and their metrics are looking good.
Absolutely, absolutely. So rightly put in, and I think you would have experienced this. Unless we handle the what's in it for them question, partnerships will never
Absolutely.
succeed.
So there's this whole confluence of content, community, and commerce, right? We're seeing this in multiple domains, whether it is like fashion or travel and so on and so forth. And that seems to have become like a huge moat. And that is perhaps one of those motions to build a brand as well, to build a new age brand. I'm curious about your comments on that, right? Because I think you have the content part sorted anyway, considering that you're working with content creators. How are you thinking about community, and how do you sort of think about brand building as such? Because again, brand is one of those levers again that can significantly reduce your customer acquisition or even lead acquisition costs and so on, right? So any thoughts on these aspects?
Yeah, so let me pick up the brand part first. Brand is very close to principles and KPI discussion. In my mind, it's almost similar. You have a principle of running your business. That principle should be spoken by your brand. But when the push comes to do sales, KPIs win. That is the reason you will see specifically in the travel space, except for exceptions like Airbnb, we have a lot of almost every other brand is a transactional brand. There is no brand affinity, and this comes down to KPIs winning. At the end of the day, I have to sell, chuck the beautiful experience, just make sure that in 3 clicks you can complete a purchase. I'm now nowhere against 3 clicks to purchase, but brand kills you in the long term because then you stay in the game of CAC. Pay more to acquire more, and you basically end up keep on acquiring market. Principally, keeping your KPIs close to that. Brand is so very important. Cannot agree more. For us, that will play out as we grow and go bigger. Early days we are trying to do all our campaigns which are driven by brand alike. All our comp strategies around that. We land the brand, but brand itself means nothing if the supporting characteristics of that brand are talking to the customer. So your touch point should be talking exactly that brand language. That we are connecting the recommenders with the consumers on the same platform, and these are genuinely helping you out. For the traveler, it is about making it easy for you to experience travel bliss. You don't need to work hard to achieve that. Staying close to that and living that in brand values every day, and the brand will start talking about it. Secondly, we manage our own ambition. The race to unicorn is a race you will lose, or you can be a 1 year unicorn, and what happens after that, all of us know. So people talk a lot about it. We are trying to pace ourselves out. If you ask me who I will pick as a good travel brand to look up to in India, could be Ease My Trip. They played it out, and yes, that is to take some inspiration and say, yeah, rushing too fast, trying to acquire too fast, you are simply buying your next 3 years inventory faster, and then you are not balancing it out. So manage expectations so my KPIs are not artificial, so I can focus on brand. That's something to keep an eye on. Content community is very, very important, but it's one of those ones. Building some people and some community products are going to come out of brand alike under the alike.io platform, because I will touch upon a overabused phrase of current times, Web 3.0 and decentralization, right? Part of Web 3.0 is too far out, too far out, and we are just getting overexcited, but we are taking some learnings from that. What is that? User behavior, decentralization. The new generation doesn't like centralization. So decentralized. How does decentralized play to us is the basic theory we are taking in designing our community offerings. So content creators are a community. We cannot prescribe anything to them. They will learn from themselves. Can we facilitate that discussion? We can provide some tools. As of now, we are providing them a studio. We have an ambition to provide them the tools and the learnings and the experience from the market for them to become better, and more importantly to learn from each other. That is what we mean out of community. And secondly, there is a community on the traveler side. There is an evolution of a like which is going to come out on the community side similarly, where centralization will not do. We cannot tell a traveler, thou shalt follow 1 2 3 4. They learn from each other. They are learning from the recommenders, the content creators. So that is one community, but they are a community among each other as well. All these communities interact with each other like we do globally in our society, in our city. We are simply taking the Web 3.0 principle, which by the way we live every day, and taking just that part out and using in our community design. So, and you will see, more products coming out and more features coming out, which explores this. And I use the word explores because we are still writing the rules of this. No one of us, whatever we claim, is an expert. So we will be exploring, rebuilding, recreating, and finally there would be a product which will be a true decentralized community playing around these facts.
Very interesting. So we have a couple of fascinating episodes on brand building. Well, more than a couple, but a couple that I can think of right now. One with Rory Sutherland, who's the vice chairman of Ogilvy Worldwide, and one with Meeta Sengupta as well. And I remember Rory referencing one of these, research studies or whatever. It was quite interesting, right? I mean, they rank ordered NPS of various users of a particular brand. And what surprised everyone was, the first few users, that is the most ardent, passionate fans, were folks who had actually had a bad experience. But it was the resolution of that bad experience that converted them into fans, right?
Very
And
important.
so those service touch points, I mean, because one would assume that, someone for whom, everything has gone well with the platform and it's been a seamless experience would be like the biggest fan, right? But yeah, I mean, the person who had a bad experience but then had a very good resolution of that seems to trust the brand even more, right?
Yeah, you brought back some memories, Roshan. So during my MBA at ISB, we had a case study on service recovery. It was on Singapore Airlines. Exactly the same outcome of that case study was exactly this. You win fans after recovering somebody's problem in a service industry. So yes, very, very true, and big believer of that. Now, don't create service problems in the first place, but yeah, recover it even better.
Yeah, service can be a point of delight, basically, right? Final couple of questions before we let you go. Was it a strategic choice to be bootstrapped? Do you have plans on fundraising? And if you look at the current macro environment, considering that it's not ideal, right? I mean, given what's happened in the markets and so on. So, how are you thinking about the next 18 months or so?
Indeed. So first of all, I think our business model was not crypto, was not fintech. Yeah, we were travel tech. First thing we did was we knew where we stand. That means we will not be a magnet for large bags running towards us with big cash amount to be invested. That made us realize that why don't we create something and then take it to the market? Yeah, because this whole proof point of a thought, we have created the platform, bootstrapped. So part of this is intentional, but part of it is also that we are generating revenues. We are generating a profitable boost to what we are doing with our business, and we can channel it back. Having said that, we do want to now, ramp up growth, and we are now in discussions with, we are out in the market and discussing with some like-minded, very important phrase for me, investors who would like to see a travel tech succeed, and finally give up on the romance for, crypto for once with whatever we are seeing around us, and potentially, fintech, which has taken enough money, and people who are willing to see beyond those fields. And there are some, exceptional and very inspirational discussions happening where people are willing to listen to our story and what we bring to the market. But to answer your question, bootstrapped by part design, part in the industry we are in, and part it was also to be better ready for these discussions. And the timing has sort of helped us. because yes, there is part of the world, slowing down. But remember what I talked about, the data around growth in travel spend. So in a non-black swan event, wherever the GDP goes, the travel index does expand, unless it is a global problem. Regional travels do not impact travel spend because we are globally set up now. So some part of the world is traveling less. So our European markets are not performing at that level, but our Asian markets are now performing middle east of the charts. So from that angle, a slowdown is there, but not global. There are global bright spots, and because we have done the hard work of creating presence globally, it is helping us, manage those challenges better.
Hmm. Hmm. When I talk to you, right, I mean, there is this theme of sustainable growth, and it wasn't in fashion maybe a year and a half back. Right, it seems to have come back in vogue, given that there isn't as much dry powder to kind of go around for founders who are suddenly having to pivot their businesses, or perhaps more fairly, I think, realign their thinking and have to now think about profitability levers and so on and so forth. What is your advice on running a business sustainably?
So maybe it was because we came from a business background and profitability was ingrained. We never ever ran into a business which was growth first and profitability will follow us. Helped us to bootstrap, helped us to, support during zero revenues as well. And then when the market came up, my message is very simple. Part of it is driven by what we see around us. And as I was commenting before, it is about the wins we see. We have moved our success metrics on the amount of fundraised instead of what actual business we are running. It is in our hands. What are we focusing on? The gratification of a press release which says X got Y amount of funding, or Z resulted in X amount of profitable growth. It's in our hands. The same part of the media which was over amplifying funding rounds, size of funding rounds, the same channels are now talking about, profitable growth. What happened? We are just 7-8 months on the other side. Not see, we all entrepreneurs are amplifiers. We amplify positivity and we amplify negativity, and this is happening in the market as well. We amplified, X number of unicorns in India in Y months. We amplified that. We are amplifying the market has gone. There are headcount reductions, everybody is slowing down, the valuation has crashed by 90%. Let's not over amplify. The business reality is simple. We need profitability. You would need profitability in your business sometime round. Why don't make it your first priority? Don't buy the market. Don't buy the market. Have this discussion with your investors when they originally came to you and said you are not ambitious enough. Buy growth. Have that chat. If it is not profitable, now we have case studies. We have case studies after case studies, companies who bought growth where they are now. Drive yourself with the right metrics. We were talking about principles and KPIs. If we can bring them near, these things will not happen, and resist the temptation of over amplifying joy and the sorrows of this entrepreneurial life as well. Don't read too much into, it's all gone, it's all dark. See what happens next year. Markets will come back. We are peaking on our recessionary trends in some markets already. It is all going to come back.
Yeah, a couple of things to add to what you said. I mean, I said this to a founder that I know that if you listen to VCs in terms of how you have to run your business, then you will have to spend and save depending on that, right? Depending on financial cycles, and a business doesn't quite run that way, right? I mean, you have to have certain everlasting principles that you have to follow irrespective of what times these are, right? Nothing is as good or as bad as it seems, and I think this is also a time where you figure out what is priority number one, right? I mean, when there was a lot of money, you could, fund perhaps one or two experiments. Now you have the knowledge of understanding which experiment is working, which is not working, and sort of you can be ruthless about that, right? I mean, you can focus on what's really working for your business, and it could be a good time to sort of rally around that, right? Yeah, I mean, I think
Very good
it's a time.
observations. Very good observations indeed.
Yeah, it's a time for us to all be sort of even keeled about things, I suppose, right?
Indeed. And I think it's a social pressure as well. Two of your friends have gone and that much funding. I take everybody back to college days. Your friend's friend got admitted to IIT. You didn't. So what? You are still successful. Somebody raised funding. Is that genuinely the right measure to go after? It is not. In the bigger scheme of things, define success I'm not saying go to Himalayas and the success is already a calm life. No, do your business, do your entrepreneurship, but fix success to the right numbers, and that right number is running a profitable business.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, on that profound note, what are some books or podcasts that you would recommend to our audience?
So, Roshan, I must confess, I'm not a big time book reader, occasional podcast, but I did read a book recently. Again, we were talking about micro markets. We read it in theory during our education, but recently to, sharpen pencils, a book I read it was the cold start problem. Cold start problem. A journal partner at A16Z, Andrew Chen, has, written a very practitioner's guide of addressing the two-sided market on how you acquire growth, etc. It's based on case studies. Andrew himself was in Uber and in San Francisco in the early days. So you get very good, tangible, case studies and examples on how, when he suggests some theory around how you should go after, two-sided business model growth, some very nice examples. And I must recommend, if the audience is into this kind of business, a good read to have. Podcasts, interesting one. There are a lot of podcasts happening. I will give a quirky one. So there is a gentleman in UK called Martin Lewis. Martin Lewis, he's an entrepreneur. His only business is telling the UK audience on the top ways they can save money. Right. So now I told you, we are not going after the extreme market, deal seeker market, but I listened to this podcast. And the reason it is a fascinating insight into how people think about finances, what they miss out and what they should go after. And I try to take learnings from there in our user behavior and buying cycles. So something to connect and something completely different from people would normally listen. Some of this content is very UK centric, but there are life lessons in between. And Martin is a very good, speaker, converting very difficult concepts into easy speak. And it just brings out some ideas for you to play around and take lateral learning from.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So Ashish, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. I really, really appreciate it. And this was a learning experience for me. As I said, we don't have too many travel folks on the podcast. Maybe I should talk to a few more of your peers, right? I mean,
your expertise is huge, Roshan, already on the travel space. I would recommend to other podcasters to get you on board to have a travel chat. And it's been a pleasure to be on this session with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ashish, and all the best for everything that you have coming up.
Thank you so much, Roshan. You take care and have a good day. Yeah, take care.
In the Park Avenue PowerPoint section, we review the highlights of this conversation. Number 1, if you're keen on starting up, prep for a pilot phase and keep outcomes of this pilot phase very narrowly defined. Don't go trying to solve bigger problems. You're proving you can succeed in this environment and not trying to prove the business model yet. Number 2, in a fragmented market, service is a key differentiator. It builds customer loyalty and helps you stand out from the rest of the crowd. So focus on delightful customer experiences. They're the best moat. Number 3, strategic partnerships can be a key lever for growth. Don't wait for until when you're much bigger to start reaching out to potential partners. Find the right person in the partner organization for whom this matters. In a two-sided marketplace, treat both sides as customers. Undue importance for one over the other comes at a cost, and so spend time aligning KPIs and expectations such that they overlap to the right degree. And number 5, finally, don't chase vanity metrics and instead focus on profitable growth so that you can retain optionality, and in hard times, you're not constrained by externalities such as a funding crunch. There you have it. These were the PowerPoints of this episode. I'll see you on another Startup Operator podcast with another amazing guest. Until then, thank you and take care. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider subscribing and leaving a review on your favorite platform. Also get updates delivered straight to your WhatsApp inbox by clicking on the link in the description.